Level 1, bring awareness to these symptoms. Bring awareness to maybe the bloated belly. And then it's like the element of choice. Where do I want to go with this? What do I want rather for myself, for my life, for my well-being, for all of that? And then the third follow-up question would be, how do I get there? What do I feel in my body, but maybe also on an emotional level and on a mental level? That's like a huge shift already. And then from there we can go and we can pick practices and really get more targeted with like what are the things you might want to shift. Is it stress in your life that you need to address, and what are practices that could help you around that? Maybe is getting a bit more grounded and learning how to handle stress better and to not go into the fight-flight response. There's so many different avenues that you go down, and depending on that you would pick belly dance, or you would pick yoga, or you would pick going for a walk every day.
Welcome to this new episode, and today I am here with Christina. How are you?
Very well, yeah.
Very nice. So Christina is an embodiment coach and educator. So we're going to talk about embodiment. First of all, I'd like to ask you, what is your story in life?
I think there was always this fascination I had with East Asian cultures and philosophies. Since I'm a child, I actually wanted to go into a Shaolin monastery when I was 11 and become like a Shaolin monk. Never did it, but it made me start martial arts back then. And then I developed that further and always did some sort of martial art for, I think, over 12 years in the end. And found Tibetan Buddhism when I was 14 as well. And all these things kept influencing me. And seeing the power of the mind-body connection, to the point that I actually ended up spending almost a year and a half living in an Aikido dojo, Aikido being a Japanese martial art. Choosing to do that instead of, when I was 11 going to China to do the Shaolin monastery, I went to Switzerland to join a dojo, as it is called, and lived there, trained every day. It contained also meditation practices and yoga. And after that, there was a desire to bring that outside, and all the insights I've had and all the profound body-based movement exercises I've learned about as well, and to bring that to normal people. So I kept training to actually do that. Trained as a coach and facilitator, specifically embodiment coach and facilitator. And the reason why I was so fascinated or so passionate about that was that when I was 24, I think, I had a complete meaning crisis, quarter-life crisis, after finishing university, studying like social sciences, humanities, partly also connected still to Southeast and East Asia. But I was like, what do I do with my life? Like all this theoretical stuff. I'm so fascinated about the body. Maybe I should become a physiotherapist, maybe this, maybe that. And I was in such confusion and such kind of identity crisis, and what do I do? Plus sliding into somewhat of a depressive state. And during that time, feeling really terrible, I sought out help in the usual way, going to some therapist that the university suggested, all that. And I sat down with that therapist and was just like, what am I doing here? This isn't doing anything. Talking about stuff. It didn't do a thing for me. But what helped was that I started going to a Contact Improvisation class, which is a dance form that's pretty free. And that completely helped me shift the way I was and how I felt in myself. Brought new joy, brought new self-connection, brought connection to other people, and a different outlook on life. In addition, going to belly dance classes in that time frame. So being quite depressed for a few months in that moment, living in Berlin, in the winter in Berlin, I have to say. I entered the class feeling really down, and my whole embodiment, my whole posture was collapsed. And I left the class with like a wide open chest, feeling positive, light, joyful, after simply, like the simplicity of it, simply rotating the chest and rotating parts of the body, paying attention, bringing awareness to the body for an hour and a half. And that for me was the biggest point of, well, I think there's so many other people who don't have the access through the mind, and there's so much stuff and problems we create for ourselves originating in the mind, so we can't resolve them or move past them necessarily with our minds.
I totally agree. Absolutely. Sometimes we have to move away from the mind and into the body, and also energy. I mean, it's very important. When you say I'm moving like that, I think of the Kundalini. But anyway, I'd like to ask you first. You always had supportive parents that encouraged you to move to Switzerland and do these things. So how did it work in terms of family life?
So I grew up with a single mom.
Okay.
And my dad was very supportive always, but he wasn't so present in my life. But my mother very much had a very trusting, supportive relationship. And I was a very independent and partly stubborn child. So when I had an idea and I wanted to do something, even when I told her I want to go to China and live in a monastery and become a Shaolin monk, she was not laughing. She wasn't ridiculing that. She just sat me down and we had a conversation about it, and in the end realized that maybe it wasn't the best idea for that time frame. But then she supported me finding a class instead, where I could practice martial arts. And when I made up my mind to want to go to Japan to spend a whole high school exchange year, 10 months, living in a Japanese family and spending a year in Japan, she was like, okay, you sure? And I was like, yes. But I did the whole application. I did everything on my own, including packing my suitcase, planning, making lists. And she was just basically there and being like, do you need anything? So she was very supportive, but I also had a very strong sort of sense of what I wanted to do, including the idea of going to Switzerland. I think
That's wonderful what you say. Like the Artemis, goddess of Greece, very independent and can-do attitude. I want to do this, I'm going to do it. And that's wonderful, right? From an early age. That's fantastic. So you got to the point where, of course, you'd gone through this fascinating and very life-enhancing journey, discovering your body, learning different techniques, etc. And then you said, okay, I'm ready now. I want to bring it to the world. Is that right? So what were your steps towards becoming a teacher?
So first I did actually sign up for a formal training. At the time it was the Embodiment Facilitators course, which was a year-long coaching and facilitation training based in the UK.
Okay, so new country again.
New country again. I lived in many different countries. And I did that. And part of that was also choosing a practice, choosing something to do, like a movement practice, while learning about the first part of the course. You learn about yourself and your own patterns, and then you shift into how can I bring this to other people? How can I facilitate, coach other people with the same tools, the same approaches, the same exercises? But also in parallel, you're picking a practice for an extended period of time. And it's really that belief that what we do is how we are. So if you do a particular action every day, this will shape how you are in your body, in your mind, in your whole way of being and moving through the world as well. So I picked Contact Improvisation in that time frame, and it really shifted the way I showed up, the way I was, almost my personality a tiny bit as well, but more like my attitude, my way of moving in the world, and relating with people. And that training then opened up the possibility to actually convey certain things that I had previously learned as well throughout all the years of training martial arts, meditation, philosophies of Eastern cultures, all that, to the normal kind of people, because it was much more focused on how can I speak to somebody who, always has just worked in an office context in central London, for instance, and never done anything, maybe attended one yoga class, because yoga at the time was already mainstream and accepted, but so many other practices were not. And if you tell somebody about even just a Sanskrit word or any terminology, or the spiritual stuff, it can be quite off-putting. And that was my intention, to learn how can I bridge these worlds as well, because there's so much value in bringing these sort of things to the normal world.
It's fascinating, and I really agree when you say that you are a lot more what you do than what you think or what you say. Although what you think also comes with it, and what you say too. But if you keep on doing the same things over and over again, maybe in automatic, without putting any awareness on why you are going through certain patterns, etc., then you become that pattern, you become that person, right? So awareness around, the way you move, let's say your posture. I had a problem myself when I was younger. As a teenager, I tended to, like close down forwards, as well. Yeah. And that also conveys a certain energy to people. They perceive you in a certain way just because of the way you carry yourself. It's so important, right? The tone of your voice, the way you show up in public. It's really a major aspect of what you are. And it's informed from the inside as well as from the outside, right? You can bridge the two of them.
Absolutely. It's like our embodiment, and my definition of embodiment comes with the context in which I trained, is always context dependent. So it's very much shaped by all these different factors of how we grew up. Like we have a core, physiological core. That's when we talk about fight-flight responses, the mammalian kind of like automatic reactions that most humans have across cultures, across everywhere. But then we have cultural influences, we have situational influences. Just to bring it to the present moment as well, how we are in this moment, you and I, is influenced by us relating, right? So how I am right now in my body depends partly on you. It depends on the situation we're in. There's a camera that films us. That will change how we are. There's a certain time of day that will even impact how I am, how I feel in this very moment. And to bring awareness to all these different layers, to the external factors influencing that, but also to simply becoming aware. Like, how are you now in your body? Have you chosen the way you sit? Right?
It's automatic, huh?
It might be automatic. That might be a pattern. And then we can start working and looking at that. And like for me, it's like, okay, have I chosen to sit how I sit? Can I notice any tension in my body? And once I have the awareness, I can add that layer of choice. Is this how you want to sit? Or is there something you would want to shift in how you sit? That might even support the current situation you're in, right? So
very good.
Very simple. But awareness and choice, basic supporting pillars of everything.
Okay, so let's delve into embodiment a little bit more. So the general theory is that many people, particularly, are very much of the mind. It's something that which is very cultural in the West as well, but which is a culture that really privileges the mind over any other aspect of the being, right? And there is a lot of value in understanding that and learning how to feel your body more. Right? So there are various different practices that you can learn so that regularly you bring yourself back into the body and you create awareness around the way you feel and the way your energy is as well. Is that right? Or what can you add to this?
I would first of all agree that the majority of people live in a very disembodied state, not aware of their body, not aware of their embodiment, different things. And it's partly historical. Cultural, Descartes, the mind is much more important, the age of enlightenment, all this theory and intellect was always prioritized and the body was seen as something less, it's the flesh, you got to deny that, you got to just push it away, it's nothing that we should, celebrate or listen to even. So yeah, absolutely agree with that. I think there's an increased awareness currently that happens on a global level, culturally, as well, to turn back to looking at including the body. And this comes a lot with discussions around trauma in particular. I think this whole wave of trauma awareness, interest into what's going on actually. So many people are struggling. There's so many symptoms of this collective disembodiment that there is a necessity to wake up and to redirect the focus and to have that return to the body, to include the body, to actually realize that it can be a resource, that it can be a source of wisdom, that it can, there's a need to make friends with it. Otherwise, we can counter it with pills, but that's not a sustainable situation.
It's terrible, right? So would you include, for instance, people that are addicted to junk food? And obviously they have, I remember when I worked in a wellness center in Koh Samui, I had some people coming and after 2 or 3 days of fasting, their belly size went down dramatically. And they told me, well, I just got rid of some gas in my belly. I thought it was fat, but it was gas instead. So even the awareness of being bloated, which is quite a discomfort, quite something that you might notice, it was not really present for them. So if you think of like different kind of like Western standard behaviors around addictions, around junk food, around maybe being on the screen too much, it's all part of the fact that people are not aware. And awareness means awareness of the mind and awareness of the body, right? So anything that brings you away from these continuous repeated patterns and addictions and make you understand that there is a part of you which is neglected, and you can see it obviously if you are putting on weight a lot, 10-20 kilos, that's an obvious symptom. If you have chronic back pain, for instance, that's another symptom maybe. And there are many different ailments and symptoms that you have in the body, and maybe you ignore or you treat through medications, right? There's another way, and the better way, is it belly dancing? Is it like martial art? Is it contact improvisation?
So one of the favorite responses is always, it depends. As I mentioned, we're operating within that idea of everything exists in the context we're in. And we need to address the context. And we need to look at what is my intention. What is like level one, bring awareness to these symptoms. Bring awareness to maybe the bloated belly. And then it's like the element of choice. Where do I want to go with this? What do I want rather for myself, for my life, for my well-being, for all of that? And then the third follow-up question would be, how do I get there? And based on setting the intention, based on that choice of where I want to be, the awareness piece, you can pick what might be a suitable approach. You could choose to take just the pills, but that would be maybe a continuation of the same stuff. So maybe you look at what can be ways I would address this, change my life, to change my circumstances, or pick up a practice that addresses that. In the work I do, I look a lot more at behavioral changes, but they can impact your health, obviously. I look a lot at generating that awareness, first of all, with people and helping them inquire into their bodies and into their mental states as well, and look and where does that connect. But it's also about like developing certain skills potentially, or it's about developing certain qualities or abilities. So that's why like I'm focusing a lot on that coaching element to like support and bring people to places of developing a new way of operating, a new way of being through practices. So step one, we would work on, what's going on here? Like what is the issue at hand and how does it show up? Bringing more and more, gradually more awareness, and that's in itself sometimes already sufficient and a big step for many people, because a lot of the time when you ask somebody, how are you? They're like, yeah, fine, good. They can't even go beyond that. So having like maybe a more granular ability to respond to that question in and of itself is a big improvement. Like if you can tell me really how you are in a certain moment, including the introspection of that, interoception, like the ability to tell me about the sensations in your body, like the level of, what do I feel in my body, but maybe also on an emotional level and on a mental level. That's like a huge shift already. And then from there we can go and we can pick practices and really get more targeted with like what are the things you might want to shift. Is it stress in your life that you need to address, and what are practices that could help you around that? Maybe is getting a bit more grounded, learning how to handle stress better and to not go into the fight-flight response with all that stuff that you have to handle, or is it like developing confidence, or is it there's so many different avenues that you go down, and depending on that you would pick belly dance, or you would pick yoga, or you would pick going for a walk every day, or maybe chopping your vegetables in a particular manner. If you're constantly stressed and you're in that rat race, maybe a practice in the start might be to just slow down in everything you do.
Makes
including
sense.
Brushing your teeth more slowly, or walking to work instead of, jumping in the car for that 5-minute drive, or it could be so many different ways of approaching it.
Yeah, you can start small and then increase. And I'd like to ask you as well, is there any sort of spiritual element you add to it, or is mostly body and mind?
There isn't explicitly. It is very much body-mind. And spirituality, we all have that element. I wouldn't exclude it, but I'm not making it explicitly part of it. Even just by asking a question of like, okay, how am I? and then leading on from that to maybe who am I, deep diving from that point can bring up certain realizations, questions, and so on and so forth, but I wouldn't call it in any way spiritual. I have a background in like certain spiritual practices, and like when I mentioned with 14 discovered Tibetan Buddhism, that in and of itself was very spiritually, and also tantrically shaping my life, my outlook on life and all that, but it's not explicitly part. It comes up in conversations through attitude, through, but
That's absolutely good. Different people have different tools, and I really like for the body and the body and mind is a lot already to work with. Right? And
actually, I would say it is already a very spiritual approach, because if you really manage to become present to your body, this is being in the now. It's almost the way to drop into the present moment is by listening to the sensations in your body, because they do not exist in the future and they do not exist in the past. This is just the mind doing it.
Yeah.
So as soon as you learn to come back to the body and stay there and become friends with it and make it your home again, all these levels, it is deeply spiritual on some level.
Yes, very good, very nice. So I know you since a while, obviously now, and we know in Kopangan there's quite a bit the Contact Improv community, right? And you're very much part of it, 100%, right? So would you suggest Contact Improv to most people that are able in the body and they have a bit of a tendency for maybe dance or connecting with others?
I love the practice. For me, it has done a lot. You can always try something out and see for yourself. I do not ever put myself in a position where I tell somebody you should do that or this is good for you. Mm-hmm. It's always about finding out empirically, testing for yourself what it does and if that's suitable for what you're looking for. Somebody says it wasn't mine, cool. But I would definitely say it's a beautiful practice that can bring a lot of insight also about, like any other practice can, about how you are, about your personality, about how you relate. That's another one of my passions, looking at relational dynamics.
Sure.
And also open you up to different ways of being and of sensing. It's very it's meditative, it's very somatic, it's very much based on being in the present moment, listening. There's a lot that you can cultivate, and that's always the question: what is it you're looking for in order, what are you wanting to cultivate? And based on that, you would choose what you spend your time with.
Very good. And for some people, maybe salsa dancing could be a first step, right? And that's very accepted and very mainstream, and it's lovely as well.
It depends on what you want to develop, right? Yeah. Like maybe if somebody is looking for unblocking that joyous, relational interaction, and they're looking to maybe look at their dynamics leading, following. That's an interesting one for partner dance, for instance. If you want to look at how am I as a follower or how am I as a leader, you could take up a partner dance and look at that. And what are other qualities that you could really dive into? And it's fascinating. If you approach a practice with the intention for insight, with the intention to maybe cultivate something, that's where it becomes interesting. You could go to the gym and be like, okay, what I'm practicing now is setting boundaries. And every, weight lift I do or every push-up I do is actually representing me setting clear boundaries and getting into my body and bringing that strength. Could be. This would be an embodied way of doing gym session,
Sounds great, very nice. I think you explained it very well. So I'd like to ask you now, there are many beautiful places in the world that, somebody that, you've been to a few of them already, and Kopangan is your home now, right, for the moment. Mm-hmm. You've been here for a few years. Why do you like the island so much that you decide to live here instead of somewhere else?
It brings together a beautiful mix of people. It's quite international on some level. The nature, it still has incredible nature, waterfalls, the ocean, that's just stunning. And there's a lot of freedom on some level that I do not perceive equally in Europe, for instance,
for sure.
simply because of a lot of restrictions, regulations, and so on and so forth. You know, here you can just hop on your scooter and be anywhere in a couple of minutes. If I was living in Berlin still, I would have to figure that out, maybe drive for 45 minutes somewhere to be in nature, like coordinate stuff in a very different way. It's the community that's here. It's the Contact Improv community, the readily available amounts of practices, embodied, spiritual, all those practices, and the island itself. Yeah.
Cool. So what are your projects at the moment? I know that you're also teaching teachers, is that right? So what are sort of in the next 6 months to 12 months, is there any projects that you're doing or any course in particular?
So I'm currently teaching on a course where I help others learn how to work with the body in coaching. So it's a bunch of aspiring coaches. Already some of them are coaches, but they want to learn how to include the body into their practice, and that's a program that's going until August now. It's regularly still happening. I'm teaching on a couple of other things also for a company called Embodiment Unlimited. They offer a bunch of courses, and I'm developing my own offerings further at the moment, next to doing one-on-one client work as well. But my own offerings will be smaller courses that help you tap into that insight about your own patterns, and hopefully have tools and techniques afterwards to change if you found that, whoa, you know, I'm a very impatient person and there's too much fire in me, for instance, to just use an example randomly, to maybe bring some softness, gentleness, or simple tools that might help you with stress. And
Very good. Well, Christina, thank you very much, for coming to Chalaklam, although you live here as well, so not too far.
I live half an hour away.
Okay, is that right? Okay. Well, thanks for coming and, just telling us about your life story and the embodiment practices that you do, okay? Kapunka.
Kapunka. Thank you.
Thank you.